Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Adriel Bowles of Hobnob Games, and this is the 14th tutorial of our intermediate series. And today we're going to be talking about range merging. As always, you can find this video along with all of our tutorial videos at hobnob.games, where you can also download and play on our free poker app. Okay, so today we're actually going to tackle a pretty difficult and advanced topic, range merging. If you've never heard of it, what is range merging? Well, let's just start with a simple definition. We range merge whenever we place a value bet with a medium strength hand when your opponent believes you're polarized. Okay, well, if you still don't know what range merging is, that's okay. Like I said, this is a difficult concept, but don't worry, we're going to walk through it together. So let's go through what I would consider a fairly standard play. This is a scenario that we've seen as poker players, thousands of times. So let's say we're in a 2-5 game and everyone's got 100 big blind stacks. So pretty standard here. Pre-flop, you've got pocket tens. So you go ahead and raise pre-flop and you get one caller. Maybe you get two callers, maybe you get three callers. Doesn't really matter here. But in this scenario, we'll just make it the simple version. You get one caller. Flop comes king of hearts, queen of hearts, five of spades. Okay, well, we don't love this flop. Now we have to face two overcards. But we still think that we should c-bet this, which is not a bad play. So we go ahead and bet. And the villain calls. We were kind of hoping the villain, we weren't kind of, we were very much hoping the villain would just fold. But the villain calls, so now we think, okay, we might be in trouble here. So on the turn, let's just say the turn is just a brick card, and we're not excited to bet here. It's hard to value bet, so we just check, and our opponent checks. Okay, so now we go to the river. The river's another brick, three of spades, no draws got there, anything like that. What do? Our opponent checks. And the vast majority of the time, at least 95% of the time, if not higher, poker players in this position will just check back the river. They'll just check back because they think, I can't value bet here. In fact, if I bet, it might be the worst bet in poker because all hands that beat me, all the stronger hands like kings and queens, are probably going to call. And all the hands that are weaker, all the hands that I beat, are probably just going to fold to this bet. So what's the point in making a bet here? I have some showdown value. My best play should just be to check. So most players just check here. And it's not a bad play. It's a fine play. But if you want to become an elite poker player, you want to start crushing your competition, then we need to be able to do better than this. So let's say we were to go ahead and place a bet here. Bet, standard, half pot, 2/3 pot bet. If we were up against a thinking opponent who's at least level 2 or higher, and they're going to think about, well, what's the range of hands? What does my opponent have here? Everything from bluff hands down at the bottom, very weak hands, to the very top, to value hands, very strong hands. And your opponent might be thinking, okay, if I have a value hand, he might have like king X. He might have a king here. He might have caught two pair along the way, although it's tough to have two pair than king queen here. And you might have a set, maybe even caught a set of threes on the river. So if my opponent's betting the river here, could be that he's got a value hand, but could also be bluffing here. Could definitely be bluffing. After all, he bet the flop, then checked the turn, and now he's betting the river. Could be a bluff. There are lots of missed draws here. Clearly, there are lots of missed flush draws. And also Jack 10, I could have been open-ended. So with these drawing hands, we bet the flop. Then when the turn came a brick, we just checked. And when the river came, now we're trying to bluff and steal the pot. So there's definitely a lot of bluff hands that we could have. So if our opponent is thinking, okay, most likely my opponent here either has a value hand or has a bluff hand. If they know anything at all about combinations and probabilities here, there are a lot more combos of missed draws here than there are value hands. That basically means that the statistical probability between a value hand or a bluff, you're more likely to have a bluff hand than a value hand here. So a lot of thinking players will kind of go through this thought process and they conclude, if I have a medium strength hand here, I should maybe call this person's river bet because they're either value betting with a really strong hand or they're bluffing, and there's more bluff hands here than there are value bet hands here. So they might call. And that way you can get value from your pocket tens, from your medium strength hand. So what's the problem here? When we just check the river here, we never bet, then what our problem is we're missing our range of hands. Our opponent thinks that we only are betting value hands and bluff hands. And our opponent would be right, because the vast majority of the time when a poker player bets here, it is either a value hand or a bluff hand and nothing in the middle. Because if they have something in the middle, a medium strength hand, they just check the vast majority of the time. So we have something missing here. What this means is that when we bet on the river, our range of hands is extremely unbalanced. There's a lot more either value bet or bluff hands than there are the hands in the middle. And this is not good poker strategy. This makes us a little bit easier to hand read and to narrow down the possible range of hands we can have, because they can take out all those middle strength hands and think that you either have, again, either a value hand or a bluff hand. So essentially in poker, this is what we call you're polarized. When they think that when you bet, you either have really strong hand or nothing at all, that means you're either one end of the pole or the other end. So that's why we come up with the term that you are polarized. And again, it's not a bad play. It just makes it a little bit easier to hand read against you and narrow down the possible range of hands that you have. Is there a better play? Can we merge our ranges here? And the answer is absolutely. What we want to do is we want to unpolarize our range to make it more difficult for our opponents to be able to hand read against our river bets. So this means that we want to start including medium strength hands like pocket tens on this board. That would be considered, a lot of these middle pair type hands would be these medium strength hands. We want to start betting those two to unpolarize our range. So let's watch it in action. Let's merge our range. So we're not just going to only bet value hands and bluff hands. Let's start merging our range. Here goes our range. There it goes even further. Merge range complete. Now when we're betting all of the strength of the hands, we're betting our value hands, we're betting our bluff hands, and we're also betting all of our medium hand strengths in between. Now we're betting the full range of strength of hands. Now we've merged our two ranges. It's not just, one extreme or the other. We've blended them to include all the ranges. This is what we mean by range merging. So when we do this, it makes you much more difficult to play against. So a note of caution here is that you only want to make this play where you're going to start betting your medium strength hands, aka merge range, against opponents that are level 2 or higher, meaning that they're thinking actively about what hand might you have. If you're up against a level 1 player who's only worried about like the strength of their hand, and that's going to dominate their decision-making process, this isn't going to work against them. Then you just want to check against them, because that adage of, well, all the stronger hands will call, all the weaker hands will fold, that's going to be true against a level 1 player. But against a level 2 player or higher, like I said, they're thinking about what hands you might have. And if they think through the process, they're going to conclude that you're polarized, and 2, even it's weighted towards bluffs more times than not. So they're going to go ahead and call, and now you can get value from your medium strength hands. So because this is a difficult concept, let's do a second example. Let's walk through another example together. So again, let's say it's pretty standard here. We're in a 2-5 game, average stack size is 100 big blinds. We get to the river, and the board is king, king, 5, and then 3 on the turn, and a 3 on the river. Okay, let's say we have some middle pocket pair like pocket 8s, could be pocket 9s, could be pocket 10s, any type of medium strength hand. Again, against the standard play is the vast majority of the time, most poker players are just going to check here. We can do better. We're going to become an elite player and do better. If we're up against a level 1 opponent, we're going to do the standard play. We're just going to check against them, because if they have a king or a 3, they're going to call us. If they have almost anything else, they're just going to fold. So there's no way, you cannot effectively value bet here. So we're just going to check with our showdown value. But if we're up against a player who is a level 2 or higher thinking player, then I think the best play here is to bet this board. So we're going to bet our medium strength hand by merge ranging. So again, if it's a level 2 or higher thinking player, they're going to think through when you bet that river, they're going to go, okay, what does my opponent have here? Could have some value hands. Value hands would include any king, any 3 here. My opponent could be betting for value. Could be some bluff hands. Maybe my opponent's got ace high here, and it's just trying to bluff me off of the hand. And let's say they've got, they hit a 5 or something like that along the way. They think they have a bluff catching hand that they're going to consider calling you with. Well, it's hard to have a king here, statistically speaking. And it's also hard to have a 3 here. And they're going to know that. So a decent amount of the time, they're going to think, if my opponent is polarized, it's going to be more bluff hands than our value hands, and they might call you down with ace high. They might try to bluff catch you, and you can get value from your middle strength hands in this manner. So our range is polarized, or the vast majority of players are polarized when they bet here. So we want to unpolarize our range. So we want to merge our range together here on this river, and we're going to do it. Here we go, initiating our range merge. Continue on. Range merge complete. Now we're not just betting our value hands and our bluff hands, we're also going to bet our medium strength hands. So now it's going to be the full range of hands that we're going to bet on the river. Makes it much more difficult to hand read against us. So some advantages. Why do you want to merge range? There are multiple advantages. One is that it helps balance out our river betting range. It makes it more difficult for our opponents, excuse me, to hand read against us when we'll bet our full range of hands here. It also allows us to get value from our medium strength hands. Again, most majority of poker players, even though they have best hand on the river, they just check this hand. Well, we have best hand. Let's try to get some value from it. And again, if we're up against a level 2 player or higher thinking player, we can get some values from our medium strength hands. So start getting value from those hands on the river. And it also can help increase the value of your strong hands, because if you do this continuously and the thinking opponents notice that you will bet even medium strength hands here, well, then when you do have a king or a 3 and you have a particularly strong hand, they're going to be more likely to call you down, thinking that like he might have a bluff hand, he might also have a medium strength hand. He could have all kinds of hands, and they'll be more likely to call you. So they'll be less likely to fold when you do have trip kings or trip 3s in this moment. So it increases the value that you get when you do make strong hands. So a quick summary of what we learned here today. One is that it turns out you can get medium strength hands with some of your river bets, but you can only do this against level 2 or higher thinking players. If it's a level 1 opponent, do not try this against them. They're going to play very straightforward. They're just going to look at the strength of their hand. If they have a strong hand, if they have a king, if they have trips, they'll call you. If they have a weak hand, they will fold. You can't get value from your medium strength hands, so just check against them and go with your showdown value. It also makes your river bets difficult to hand read. So again, your thinking opponents are going to notice that you'll bet your medium strength hands. It makes you much more difficult because you're balanced on the river. So this is what it looks like if you're polarized. You're very unbalanced. But if you start range merging, then you can get to this mode. You'll be much more balanced in your river betting range. Makes you much more difficult to hand read, a much more difficult player to play against. If you do this, if you start merge ranging and you do it effectively, I guarantee you'll see your poker win rate increase. Next time, we're going to be talking about a very important concept, stack leverage. As always, you can find this tutorial along with all of our tutorial videos at Hobnob.